Before the video begins, I would just like to address the variable voice quality of my recording here. There were times during the process where I had to go and re-record or redo certain things, and unfortunately I didn't realise at the time that my mic being at different positions relative to my mouth caused the voice quality to change as well. And my mic isn't the greatest, so it's not as clear as I would like it to be. Hopefully I can invest in a better mic soon so I can have better audio quality when doing the voiceovers for these things. So apologies in advance of my voice sounding a bit inconsistent over the course of this video. Thank you for understanding and please enjoy the video. Do you have any childhood favourite games that you spent years holding in high regard, but then, years later, went on the internet and found out that it was actually kind of hated? For me, that was Sonic Heroes. I loved it back when I was like 8, and had loads of great memories with it. But when I grew older and discovered the wonders of the internet, I learned that not everyone else shared my sentiments. In this video, I'm going to look back at one of my favourite childhood games under a slightly more critical, somewhat more level light. Sonic Heroes was the first Sonic game I ever played, so naturally I have a degree of nostalgia for it. I think everyone has a certain amount of bias for their nostalgic games, which can allow for some leeway. But I think when discussing games like this, it's important to try and separate those feelings. There are things I love and there are things I hate. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, so I'm going to try and compartmentalise that for now. I first played Heroes at an age when such things as the quality of a game just meant nothing to me, so naturally I thought it was the best game ever. I had no problems. The graphics were lit, the gameplay was straight fire. As Master Chief might say,
"It is quite literally the most game of all the times. I cannot actually comprehend just how most it actually is."
Although it's worth noting that around this time I also considered The Matrix Path of Neo and Spider-Man 3 to be the best games ever as well. If you know anything about Sonic Heroes, you'll no doubt be aware that it's a game with problems. This is a game that's extremely easy to clown on with its slippery movement, questionable voice lines, inconsistent platforming, repetitive repetition required for receiving the rewards required for the final reveal. A little bit of repetition for you there? Yeah, this game does have plenty of reasons to not like it very much. I don't really want to beat the dead horse and complain about how bad 3D Sonic games are, but I do think that a lot of these games need you to possess a certain level of... I'm not sure how to word this, so I'll call it put-up ability. I'm not even sure if there's a real word for it, but what I mean is your enjoyment of them may depend on your tolerance for inevitable jank. If you're able to look past these issues that plague certain titles and enjoy the other aspects, then you'd probably love them. If you're easily put off by slippery controls, wonky mechanics, and frequent unfair game overs, then I wouldn't blame you for disliking these games. I personally have quite a low tolerance for bullshit, and immediately often drop games quickly, which is why I'm so surprised that after playing Sonic Heroes all these years later, I really enjoyed it. And I actually have a lot of positive things to say. Of course there are issues, and have no fear, I'll get to those. But if you're looking forward to someone shitting on the game non-stop, then you might be a bit disappointed with this video. To add an extra layer of surprise on top, it was the PS2 version I played, running on the PS3. The PS2 port of Sonic Heroes is infamous for its bugs and glitches, a far less stable port than the GameCube and Xbox ports. It was the GameCube version I played as a child as well. I don't have any footage of this because I don't have recording software of my PS3, but you'll just have to take my word for it that it was a bit wonky throughout. I've been playing the GameCube version on my GameCube plugged into my television. That good old CRT. And hot damn, playing a version of the game that actually functions with a higher resolution and stability was great. All the gameplay footage will be here from my playthrough, with some clips from my good friend Jake's stream, where things happened. Sonic Heroes has an art style that's not bad, but the characters do have this weird, shiny, rubbery quality to them that just looks kind of strange. This may sound weird, but I think I might actually prefer the way they looked in Adventure 2, if I'm being completely honest. The general gameplay is similar to previous adventure games, but differs in some key ways. While those games feature different storylines that ran alongside each other with gameplay styles that were unique to them, Sonic Heroes is instead centered around 4 teams, each comprised of characters from previous games in the Sonic franchise, with different reasons for working together. I'll go into the characters later on, but for now I'll just say that each team is comprised of 3 different character types: Speed, Power and Flight. Each of these types plays a different way, and you'll be switching between these types in order to progress through the stages. The main buttons for doing things are still the same, but they do things in different ways. Speed characters play pretty much the same way that Sonic and Shadow did in Adventure. They move forward fast, they can use the homing attack and lightspeed dash, but also have some new options like the tornado jump, which can be used to launch enemies and spin around poles to proceed. There's also the triangle jump, which lets you bounce from wall to wall, which is pretty fun. Unfortunately, Sega saw fit to taketh away the spin dash and replace it with a rocket excel, which is marginally less cool and means that you can't do crazy spin skips like you could in Adventure. Power characters are all about smashing enemies to bits through melee attacks. They don't just whack robots with their bare hands, oh no. The power characters literally wield the other 2 team members like wrecking balls. It's great. There's a light combo you can do that adds an AoE to the end of a few punches, and if you jump in the air with characters equipped, then you can do a ranged attack by launching your teammates at enemies like cannonballs. Power characters are also needed for some traversal, mainly being able to glide over these giant fans via the revolutionary triangle dive. Flying characters are based around, well, flying. They form a sort of human, animal ladder, where the other teammates below them, somehow hanging on, and they can fly for brief periods of time to cross gaps, indicated by this gauge on the UI. Their attack is the ranged thundershoot, which fires teammates outwards as projectiles which can bounce around enemies. They have the slowest movement speed out of all 3, but this means that you're less likely to fall off the stage, so stick to flying if you're not super confident. There's a level up system in place that allows characters to gain up to 3 levels each, indicated by these little dots on the HUD. This just means that their attacks get stronger, with the most visually noticeable changes being the power character's range attacks, powering up into new moves, and the thunder shot bouncing around more. Speaking of thundershoot, upgrading it to level 3 turns it into an absolute beast of a move, being able to take out entire groups of enemies at once with a single shot. When you've got this, there's really not much point in even using power characters, unless it's against specific enemies that require the usage of it. You swap between the characters by hitting a corresponding face button, which works well enough, but sometimes it's a bit clunky. On the PS2 version, I had times when I'd hit a button but the wrong character came in and got me killed. For instance, I'd want to swap into a flying character and use Thundershoot, but I'd accidentally swap into a speed character instead and do a rocket excel off the edge of the stage. This happened a few times and it was incredibly annoying. You can't swap in the air either, so if you were to jump onto one of these giant fans with a speed character and get stuck floating around, you'd have no way of progressing because you can't swap to someone who can glide. Being able to swap more fluidly on the fly would have made the levels feel a bit more smooth and keep up momentum, I think, but there was probably reasons why we couldn't swap on the fly. The speed character's homing attack is really fun to use, and bouncing off a sequence of enemies to cross a chasm just feels so damn satisfying. It works most of the time and it makes for some really nice set pieces. I'm really not sure how this works, but sometimes teammates can randomly fly around you and kill enemies. This actually caused me to die here in Power Plant because I was supposed to homing attack enemies to cross this gap, but since they so helpfully kill the enemies, I had no way of progressing. Thanks teammates, that was a great help. Each team has their own team blast, which can be filled up with a gauge by picking up rings, hitting enemies or just using the exploit. These are basically screen clearers with a different cutscene, depending on the team, but some of them do have different effects. Team Sonic's is them just flying around smacking into enemies, but as far as I can tell it has no extra effects. Team Dark uses Chaos Control to destroy the enemies and also freeze time for a bit. This is cool and all, but it also means that it can freeze parts of the level that would otherwise require you to interact with them. If you use Chaos Control before something like a switch or a button, then you'll have to wait for the effects to end before it works. Team Rose does this snazzy little umbrella dance that also levels up the characters, and Team Chaotix belts out the most obscenely good music known to man, with tunes so great that they destroy enemies and give you rings for each enemy killed. Nice. Sonic Heroes is infamous for its slippery movement, and it's definitely something that takes some getting used to. The acceleration on characters' movement is quite high, and if it's your first time playing, then you may be surprised by how fast they can take off with the slightest nudge of the stick, and find yourself slipping right off the edge. This can lead to some irritating deaths, which really start to grate on you if it happens repeatedly. After you've spent a bit of time playing, then you'll eventually get used to it and control your movement better, but you can still slip up here and there. I personally got used to it and reached a point in the game where it rarely happened to me, but the fact that it can be so frequent is a clear sign that something went wrong here. Interacting with switches and pulleys can get really fiddly and annoying at times, with some precise positioning needed in order to line up properly. When things flow well and you're not falling off anything, there's some great fun to be had here though. Combat isn't really one of this game's strong points. In most Sonic games, enemies are pretty much just part of the scenery that you interact with via progression of a stage. They're less of an enemy encounter and more of a dangerous switch or bounce pads that you need to get past. In Sonic Heroes, you'll frequently have to stop dead in your tracks during a stage and have to take out a group of enemies. This can really kill the pacing, especially when you're against the meteor enemies. Speed characters can take out enemies with a homing attack, or the tornado jump, which can be used to remove the shields that some later bad guys have. If you just try hitting these enemies with regular attacks, then the shield will pretty much absorb most of the damage. It's good to have different characters useful for different combat purposes, to encourage swapping in the fight. You need to be careful when using the homing attack though, because you could just miss and fall instead. Whoops. Power characters just kind of swing around hitting enemies, but these attacks have momentum that carry you forwards, and this unfortunately has the side effect of possibly sending you off the edge. That's not good, is it? The most troublesome enemies in the game are these big guys with hammers. They attack by swinging down or spinning around, and you need to hit them with power characters to destroy them. That's not so easy to do though, because they love to either slam the hammers down or spin around, neither of which can be interrupted. You need to stand there and wait for the attack to be over before moving in. And when the attack is finished, they'll be dizzy for a few seconds, to hit them with a thunder shoot, which knocks them over, which in turn gives you a chance to smack them around. This is already tedious, but later on you encounter variants with helmets on, who have more health, and can only be damaged by hitting them in the head. This means that you either need to tornado spin the helmets away, or just knock them over the usual way, which also sends the helmets clattering away. You need to do that, wait for them to attack, get dizzy, knock them over, then hit them in the head, and hope you're standing in exactly the right spot to even damage the thing. They're only vulnerable for a few seconds, so pray you don't accidentally walk into their body and take damage, thus wasting precious time. These guys are just irritating to fight, and it feels like a slog every time, which is a shame because bouncing and smashing through the other enemies is actually quite fun sometimes. So who are these four teams? Well, first up is Team Sonic, who most people would naturally gravitate towards as their first playthrough. I mean, it's not called Dark Heroes, is it? Sorry, that was a bad joke. It's made up of Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, filling their respective roles of speed, flying and power. Their stages are considered to be the standard length and difficulty of the game, with just enough enemies and platforming sections to keep you on your toes, but nothing too ball-breaking. Next is Team Dark, the hardcore, sort of edgy-ish trio comprised of Shadow, Rouge the Bat and E123 Omega. Shadow and Rouge returned from the debut in Sonic Adventure 2, but Omega is new. Team Dark stages are the longest with the most enemies, and are considered the hard mode. Not the actual hard mode, but out of all four teams, they're the most challenging. Shadow is suffering from amnesia after Sonic Adventure 2, where he, died. He's not as antagonistic or snarky here, but he does have his moments. He's actually pretty reasonable and well adjusted here. Rouge is, well, she's a treasure hunter, and she admittedly isn't as interesting or... Okay, I just have to ask, was this design appropriate for kids? I mean, was it necessarily to safely design her like that? Oh, then again, she did come from the same game where a teenage girl was gunned down by soldiers, so I guess it's fine. Omega is awesome. He's just this hulking robot that's obsessed with killing Eggman and destroying all of his creation. Any chance he gets, Omega will talk smack about those consumer models. He's so single-minded in his goal that he frequently has to remind the others to stay focused on their mission and stop gawking at the scenery. Team Rose is the Goo Goo Gaga baby mode team of heroes. It's made up of Amy Rose, Cream the Rabbit and Big the Cat. Their stages are by far the shortest with the least enemy. If you want quick, more digestible stages that don't last all too long, then you'll do fine here. In fact, on the off chance that I fancy playing a bit of heroes every now and again, Team Rose is just sometimes my team of choice. Amy can get pretty annoying with her constant desire to marry Sonic, but she's fun enough. Instead of a regular tornado jump, she swings and spins around with a Pico Pico hammer, although it's called the tornado hammer here. Cream is polite and naive, often vocalising her amazement at what she's seeing. I like her quirk of referring to adults with Mr. and Mrs. It's cute. Her years are on backwards though. Good luck unseeing that. Big is divisive. Some find him to be a lovable, simple oaf, but the others detest him, using words I don't care to repeat here. His dialogue doesn't really help his case though.
The cute rabbit can do it.
I like him though. He's just a big cat who wants to fish with his frog friend. Don't we all? Finally, there's Team Chaotix. They're a detective agency who takes on all sorts of jobs so that they can pay the bills. It's made up of Espio the Chameleon, Charmy Bee, and Vector the Crocodile, who return from Knuckles Chaotix. Vector is a loudmouth, with enough gumption and bravado to really bring this team together, even though they can bicker quite a bit. Espio is devoted to his ninja training, and frequently makes references to it. It's actually really endearing. He just goes on and on about being a ninja. Charmy is impetuous and a chatterbox. I mean, he is basically a child, so you know. And I really like the dynamic between the three of them, because you really get the sense that these are three friendly colleagues with plenty of banter and heart between them.
Talk about a huge misunderstanding.
Yeah, sure made fools out of ourselves.
Nothing new for you, Vector!
What? You were the first one to jump at the chance!
Not super Reggie, nor super wholesome and nice. It's a good mix.
Who's this broad?
While the other teams have practically identical gameplay loops of getting from the start of the stage to the end, Team Chaotix usually has missions. These involve progressing through the stages with extra requirements, such as eliminating every enemy or getting to the end without being detected. These aren't super difficult or obtuse, but I can see why people dislike them. There's times where you need to reach the level under the impression that you fulfilled the requirements, but it turns out that you missed something along the way. And now you have to backtrack, going through it all again, looking for the missing thing. Thankfully, at the end, there's simply a teleport back to the start, so there's no need to manually backtrack or get penalised with the game over for failing to do all of the things. This may sound blasphemous, but I actually quite enjoyed the treasure hunting in the adventure games because it was a more relaxing change of pace, and to a lesser but still positive degree, I kind of enjoy the Team Chaotix missions too. Maybe it's just because I'm thorough, but I rarely, if ever, found myself needing to repeat stages to clean up missing mission objectives. I pretty much just picked up everything along the way without needing to go back. But, you know, I can see why people would miss things. The voice acting is fine, and I actually really like some of these voices, especially Ryan Drummond as Sonic. This was the last game to feature this cast before it switched to the Sonic X cast, and it's a shame to see them go because they were my personal favourites. Tails is voiced by an actual child who makes it sound authentic, I guess. I'm not sure why the voice clips on changing characters sound so weird though. I mean, Knuckles sounds like a chain smoker here.
Got it!
The English script has some noticeable translation quirks, with the most noticeable being
Shit, look at all those Eggman robots!
and plenty of other lines being repeated. That's localization for you, I guess. There's another thing involving the Japanese and English scripts being a bit different, but we'll cover that when we get to the final boss. The Sonic Heroes theme is a earworm and one of Crush 40's best, though not the best. It's a peppy butt rock tune all about fighting evil and saving the day. But when I was a kid, I thought the line Heroes Parade was actually Heroes Subway. Why would a hero need a subway? I have no idea. Each team has a theme song, with lyrics and a style suited to their characters. Team Sonic's is We Can, an upbeat, happy rock tune all about teamwork that snuggles in quite nicely into the already existing 3D Sonic sound. Team Dark has This Machine, which is a more industrial sounding song, which talks about Shadow's mysterious past, the members' powers, and also Eggman being a creep. Team Rose has Follow Me, which is basically a female version of We Can, but a bit more romantic, and it's honestly my favourite out of the four. Team Chaotix has Team Chaotix, that's what the song is called, and along with This Machine, it is the most direct song, telling you all about the characters. The chorus also has this catchy Team Chaotix. Sonic Heroes' plot is quite bare. There is an overarching story here, but that's only really at the beginning and the end, with some fluff in the middle. Each team has their own introductory cutscenes that establish their reasons for being here. Cutscenes at the start of every stage and before boss fights, and then a wrap up at the end. Sonic is just doing his thing one day, running through the canyons, when Tails and Knuckles show up, and he gets this animated letter from Eggman, telling him about some ultimate weapon that he's going to unleash. Weirdly, he addresses them as Sonic Heroes. I mean, did they go around calling themselves or what? With that, they speed off towards the adventure. Elsewhere, Rouge the Bat breaks into one of Eggman's vaults in search of a secret treasure, and instead stumbles across a pod containing Shadow, who everyone thought was dead. This activates E123 Omega, who had been left there to guard him. Omega immediately opens fire on the intruder, and Shadow wakes up just in the nick of time to spring to action and break up the fight. Since the three of them have beef with Eggman and Shadow wants answers, they decide to team up and track him down. Elsewhere again, Team Rose is kicking it back on the beach. There was a newspaper story about Sonic apparently kidnapping Froggy and Chocola Chow, and Amy wants to investigate, not only to find their missing friends, but so that Amy can catch up with Sonic and marry him. That's pretty much it. Team Chaotix is chilling in their office one day waiting for a job. Well, what do you know? One comes in. Who could this mysterious client be? Well, you'll just have to find out. After that, it's pretty much just a straightforward journey through a bunch of stages that are loosely connected some way or another. The game is structured in a similar way to the older Sonic games, with 2 stages of a similar locale, sort of like the acts of old Sonic games followed by boss fights. I'm going to do a rundown of the stages and the bosses in between with any relevant story things sprinkled in here and there. Seaside Hill is your typical first Sonic stage, featuring different traversal options in a relatively safe environment. Other than a few times, none of these jumps are really over huge bottomless pits, so you're free to grow accustomed to them without too much worry. The backdrop is this lush beach, with sandy shores and bits of ruins here and there, accompanied by this iconic track. Out of all the 3D Sonic games, I would confidently say that Seaside Hill is the most iconic, well-remembered non-vocal track, and for good reason. It's energetic and exciting, perfect for the introductory stage of this game you've just started. I'm not a music buff, so I won't be commenting on every single track with in-depth insight, but there are standouts that I'll be sure to shine a spotlight on when I feel it's relevant. The next stage, Ocean Palace, takes you away from the beach and into the ruins of the nearby palace, with plenty of blocks that are just waiting to fall down and crush you. There's some basic alternate paths and triangle diving, and it culminates in being chased by a giant rolling rock. Is this thing sentient? Did Eggman send it after you? Who knows? I'm not even sure what the reason for being here in the first place is. After those 2 stages is the first boss, the Egg Hawk. Eggman is piloting this bird-shaped plane that constantly runs away while shooting at you, and periodically stops at these wide areas to spin round in a circle while shooting you some more. The game tries to encourage you to use the power character to hit them here, but really you can just spam the homing attack with the speed character and get it over with pretty fast. If you destroy the rotors on either side, then it'll prevent the rotary attack. But there's not really much point in bothering with that, since it'll be over with quickly anyway. That takes care of that. Eggman flies away to parts unknown. Grand Metropolis kicks off the next pair of stages, a techno city with powered energy walkways that carry you along faster. Through some dialogue you learn that Eggman is in control of the city and trying to use the energy here for something, and that's what you're here for. Omega advocates casual roboticide, which is nice.
Eliminate all Eggman robots, regardless of their purpose.
This stage unfortunately introduces switches that need to be pulled, which honestly just slow the place down. There's quite a few lightspeed dash opportunities here, and they are always fun, but it can occasionally be a bit wonky to activate if you're not at the exact right range from the first ring to do it. I'm not quite sure what happened here, but I somehow got stuck on a loop and had to spend some time readjusting myself so I could move forward. Power plants feature similar scenery, but it also has more indoor segments. With Team Dark, there's an awesome alternate path with a lightspeed dash here right at the start, if you're fast enough to notice it. And it's good to reward quick-thinking players like that. There's a sequence on an elevator later on that can be mostly skipped with boost rings and the lightspeed dash again, but my depth perception usually screws me over here and I miss them. The stage culminates in an escape from a rising energy liquid that looks like lava, and it will kill you if you wait too long. As a kid, I found this incredibly stressful and hard to deal with. I'm pretty sure I needed to get people to do it for me. After this is a boss fight against a rival team. In each story there are 2 of these. These are not good. You have to try and knock each other off the stage, with certain characters being stronger than others, forming a sort of rock, paper, scissors thing. Sounds simple enough, but the mechanics make it pretty awkward to do, and you may end up getting one-shotted off the stage, ad nauseum. The best way to win these is just to stay in the air with the flying character and thunder shoot them until you win. Easy peasy. After those first couple of stages kicked off the game in a pretty positive light, it's time for the next outing, which is sure to be a fun time had by all. Welcome to Casino Park. The stage aesthetics? Wonderful. Casino stages are a bit of a staple of Sonic games, since the gameplay usually lends itself well to wacky hijinks involving Sonic being spun around by bumpers and flippers, so I can't really blame them for returning to it every now and then. The music? It's wonderful. A welcoming, playful tune that feels fitting for the wholesome fun of gambling. The stage design and gameplay mechanics? Absolute dog shit. Call it a skill issue if you want, but I am just plain terrible at the pinball tables here. It's not like I hate pinball. I mean, I don't like it either, but I'll put up with it if I need to, and I guess it can be mindless fun. In Sonic Heroes, pinball is not mindless fun. It's infuriating. When you're on the table, you have some degree of control, being able to move left and right as you attempt to reach the exit of the board. While traversing the board, you have to contend with bumpers, boostings, and flippers, which you can manually control with the X button. If it were just a little side activity you could do for extra coins, then I wouldn't mind so much, but it's required for progression. This means you need to put up with minutes of bouncing around aimlessly, desperately trying to get to the ending, but just missing it. Well, if you're as bad at this as I am, that is. Bingo Highway is a bit better since the overabundance of annoying pinball tables is reduced, but there are still a few. Now, there's bingo tables, which still feature you rolling around like balls with left and right control, but thankfully most of it is downhill traversal with no chunks of time wasted on trying to get to the exit, although it's still present, it's just not as much. You can collect these numbers, which collate to that bingo card up there, and you get a ring prize if you achieve bingo. Although, I need to admit, simply getting a line isn't bingo. I've been to real bingo, and you can't just shout bingo when you get a line. It's not a requirement for finishing the stage, but you do get a nice ring bonus. Towards the latter half of the stage, there's bottomless pits while you're rolling down the table, which you need to be careful of. But if you're worried about falling off, then there's a little trick you can do. You see, characters can get separated on the board and left behind, and if you swap characters, there's a chance you could warp back to where someone else is, potentially miles behind. This means that you can use this to your advantage. If you accidentally fall off the stage, you can save yourself by switching to someone else who was back on the platform. Nice. There's a VIP area hidden behind this laser barrier that requires a switch to open, but I somehow glitched through it instead. I like the fact that in the Team Dark run at this stage, nobody really feels the need to explain the mechanics of bingo. I mean, why would they? They're adults, they don't care. I do love how Omega shouts bingo though.
Bingo! Bingo!
The next boss is Robot Carnival, which is just a gauntlet of different arrangements of enemies, while Eggman hovers about in his hover chair thing. Not really much to say here. Rail Canyon, as the name suggests, is a canyon full of rails. Visually, it's very striking, with long stretches of metal rails, shelters and other structures, set against this endless rocky wasteland. Judging by all of the equipment and machinery around here, there's obviously some sort of base utilised by Eggman, likely the staging ground for whatever his big plan is. The set pieces here involve big leaps and hoops that I can imagine giving someone with a fear of heights a really bad time. Occasionally while grinding, you'll encounter armoured trains that don't really do much and aren't really much of a threat, but add to the spectacle nonetheless. That all sounds good on paper, but unfortunately throughout the stage you're at the mercy of Sonic Hero's inconsistent grinding. Pretty much every rail section features a set of rails, usually in threes, which you can quickly swap between. Most of the time you'll want to swap in order to pick up rings and power-ups, but later on you'll be needing to dodge enemies and other hazards. This is done by tilting the stick to either side and hitting the jump button. But as is with the case of relationships, sometimes they just don't work out. There may be times when you want to swap rails, but instead catapult yourself into the abyss, forever questioning your life choices, including why you're playing this game. It was definitely much worse in the PS2 version though. There's coloured rails that change direction when you hit the switch here, which usually happens along the set path anyway, but here and there it's some very light puzzle solving ones, where you gotta try and make the right route. Bullet Station is pretty much just more of the same as Rail Canyon, but with some added sequences on top for variety. Here you'll board trains that are travelling somewhere, and destroy them by smacking a power supply, after some fighting and platforming. They're a nice way of breaking up the level design, with some triangle jumping thrown in for good measure. The other new thing here involves jumping into this giant cannon that then shoots the team outwards through this thin canyon. While flying, you're able to move side to side to grab pickups, and at some point you'll probably get sick of the voice lines playing every time. Egg Albatross is the boss here, which is a big blimp looking thing filled with egg pawns on turrets, and the Egg Hawk on top. The fight has 3 phases, requiring you to hit different parts of the boss each time. In phase 1 you're supposed to hit the wings, avoiding fire from the mounted cannons that fire energy rings. Like the Egg Hawk before, you can just beat the boss by spamming homing attack at the weak spots in every phase, which is exactly what I did. Not gonna lie, homing attacking over this chasm made me nervous. The Egg Hawk at the end is just the same Egg Hawk as before, except with more dangerous pits and no rotary attack. Fun stuff. Following the defeat of the Egg Albatross, with some characters, there's a cutscene showing Eggman's robotic remains, and when the characters turn away, this puddle of goo comes out, along with some spiky character, saying that the data has been copied. While all this was happening, Eggman has taken this opportunity to ready up his fleet and fly away. Because of course, this was all a distraction. Egg Fleet is the stage from this game that always gets the most love, but I'd like to give special mention to this next pair of levels, Frog Forest and Deep Jungle. They take place in a verdant, wooded biome that's full of giant trees and vines, as well as these mushroom pad things. It's populated by not only the usual Eggman robots, but by these large frogs too. Gee, I wonder why it's called Frog Forest. The gimmick of these stages is that the frogs cause rainfall when approached, which can alter the traversal options of the stage. At first, there's only the benevolent green frogs, who call rain, that causes flora around them to grow. Springy mushroom bounce pods, platforms, and grindable vines continue to sprout throughout the stage, provided you interact with the frogs. and this can provide some really fun on-the-fly improvisation and alternate routes if you look for them. On this most recent playthrough, I actually found some frogs that I didn't even know existed, and I took a path that rewarded me with some extra lives. Vines by themselves are little more than reskinned rails, but grinding along one as it continues to sprout ahead of you just looks really cool, and it fits well with the stage's overall mechanics. Lost Jungle introduces the evil black frogs that cause evil rain, which makes already existing platforming options shrivel away, forcing you to take a different, usually more dangerous path. In most instances, these black frogs are actually avoidable if you're quick or creative enough, which can again lead to more paths for you to take. It's awesome. Also, Omega cannot resist the opportunity to dunk on the robots again.
I can get through here!
By fruits, how weak they must be.
I just love the shade from this guy. These stages feature two new traversal options, flying flower helicopters and swingable vines. I'll start with the flowercopters first. When a speed character does a tornado jump next to one, it'll take off and fly along a set path, with some control given to the player in order to adjust to pick up ring balloons. It can be a bit awkward to do sometimes, but that may just be due to my awful depth perception. When flying with these flowers, you're able to jump off at any time, and though it's usually a bottomless pit beneath you, there are alternate routes and hidden areas you can discover by being daring and letting go, when you see something that catches your eye. Discovering alternate routes and hidden paths is always my favourite aspect of a Sonic game, and it's always great to see here. The vine swinging is something that requires a bit of finesse to pull off successfully. When hanging onto one of these, you automatically swing back and forth, with no input needed from the player. Thankfully, it's not like the swinging in Kingdom Hearts. In order to swing from vine to vine, you need to let go of the jump button while at the apex of the swing, which isn't super difficult to do, but it's easy to get caught up in the heat of the momentum and mistime it. This happened to me quite a few times. The final chase at the end of Deep Jungle is reminiscent of Crash Bandicoot, with the team escaping from a giant crocodile towards the camera, requiring a sequence of almost frame-perfect vine swings. If you mess up a single one of these, then it's back to checkpoint. If you didn't get the hang of vine swinging by now, then you're in for a rough time. There's another team boss here, and it's pretty much the same shit as last time, so just hover in the air and thunder attack them until you win. The next two stages are Hang Castle and Mystic Mansion. The gimmick of Hang Castle is the ability to flip it up and down with these orb switches. You'll need to do this to progress, and they do make quite creative use of it. The music actually changes depending on the orientation of the stage too, making it quite dynamic. I love the spooky aesthetic of these two stages. It feels like a spiritual successor to Pumpkin Hill. There's even ghosts that pop out of you to scare you, and characters actually react to this.
Hey, you surprised me!
Hey Sega, how about you give Green Hill a rest and add more spooky ghost stages? In one part of the level, there's this statue of Eggman, and when it's flipped, it shows some kind of spooky looking bloke. I wonder who that is. Mystic Mansion doesn't really use as much of the flippy orientation that Hang Castle did, but it uses the same switches for some light traversal solving instead. It does have kart sections though, and I don't really like them. I should probably mention by now that some stages of this game have kart sections, which pretty much is just you automatically going forward, moving side to side and jumping to avoid obstacles. It's not as hands-on as the kart stages from Sonic Adventure 2, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on if you enjoyed those or not. At the end of the stage is this void, where you have to clear challenges with each character. In Team Sonics it involves platforming with each character, but in Team Darks it's just fighting enemies. I think I prefer Team Sonics to be honest. The boss here is Robot Storm, which is basically just Robot Carnival again, but with more enemies. This one's a bit of a slog to be honest, because there's just a bit too many enemies for my taste. But when I did this fight with Team Chaotix, I did somehow end up hitting the maximum amount of rings, just by using the Team Blast. So that's cool I guess. This part with the cannon was quite annoying as well. Now it's time for the final two set of stages, and both of them kick all kinds of ass. It's the home stretch now, so Sonic Heroes goes all balls to the wall and spectacle. Egg Fleet immediately makes a great impression, with this extremely hammy introduction from Eggman.
You fools must all have a death wish. Witness this invincible battleship, built by the hands of a genius. Its power, unmatched throughout the universe.
Followed by the sight of your character zooming across this breathtaking skybox, populated by a huge amount of Eggman's airships, which are all shaped like big fish. Consistency is good, I guess. The verticality here is crazy, and as you're zipping across the rails and hopping from platform to platform, you can't help but get a sense of grandeur. There's a reason fans wanted Egg Fleet to represent Sonic Heroes and Generations, because it's by far the standout stage here. One false move can send you careening down like Shadow at the end of SA2, so you need to be careful up here. You'll be moving from battleship to battleship, dodging cannon fire and some of Eggman's new robots, which thankfully aren't as annoying to fight as the big hammer guys. You'll even blow some of these battleships up as you blast your way through, showing just how far you've come in the game. You've gone from destroying weak-ass egg pawns to taking down entire squadrons of battleships armed to the teeth. How cool is that? The helicopter flowers are back, except they're metal now. You have to dodge cannon fire by moving up and down, and fun fact, this game taught me what ascend and descend means. Thanks, game.
Sure are lots of battleships!
Where'd they get so many?
They really went overboard!
The transition between Egg Fleet and the final stage, Final Fortress, is epic, with the team flying towards Eggman's monstrous airborne base in the stormy backdrop. Granted, it's pretty much just a JPEG, but I still love it. This stage will put to the test the skills you've learned throughout the game, and you'd better be ready because it pulls no punches. There's wall jumping, lots more grinding, light speed dashing, triangle jumping, and battling tough enemies in multiple groups, and it's up to you to break through it all and reach that end goal. The music in this stage is awesome. It's got this mix of electronic spice mixed in with rock that really gives it this climactic feel as you make your way towards Eggman's inner base. As I said, you'll have to fight many enemies along the way with multiple encounters. Unfortunately, this includes the big hammer douchebag, so I'd recommend just saving a team blast for those. The big finale of Final Fortress involves travelling down a track of multiple rails, avoiding a shit ton of lasers that require some quick swapping to avoid, before speeding forwards to beat a giant mega laser. If you take too long on this rail, then this thing will zap you. I'm so glad the rails didn't screw me over in this part.
Target destroyed. Searching for next target.
Now it's time for the final boss, the Egg Emperor. This guy is relentless, and he has a few attacks that can really ruin your day if you're not careful. His main move is slicing the air with his lance and launching these energy slices at you while shouting, "Take this, take this, take this," non-stop. Be ready to hear that line a lot. He also launches missiles that are easy enough to avoid but can pick you off if you get careless. Finally, if you fall too far behind when chasing him, he'll charge right at you, but luckily this can be countered with a power character. The fight boils down to chasing him down a straight path while avoiding his attack and picking up power-ups along the way, then stopping on this big platform for a few minutes to properly fight him. These usually are filled with cannons and other enemies that pelt you from all sides. But they don't matter, because honestly, if you're struggling with this fight, you can just stay in the air and pelt him with Thundershoot until he dies. I guess the game wants you to use everyone to fight him, but a leveled up Thundershoot just does such a good job that you don't really need to bother. This line from Omega while I was mid-cheese was also hilarious to me.
Now to face real evil, Dr. Eggman.
That's the end of the story, and each team has their own respective wrap-ups. Team Sonic celebrates their victory and then Amy shows up to chase Sonic away. Team Dark has finished their mission, but then Rouge stumbles into a vault full of what appears to be robotic copies of Shadow in the same pods that she found him in. Omega reassures her that the original one is still around though. This will get followed up in Shadow the Hedgehog. Team Rose is reunited with Froggy and Chocola, and then it syncs up with the Team Sonic ending that has Amy chasing after Sonic.
Chaos data has been copied.
What was that? Team Chaotix breaks further into the base and discovers that their client was none other than Eggman himself, who essentially hired them to rescue him from imprisonment. He can't exactly pay them right now though, and they're not happy about it, so they beat the crap out of him. Nice. The credits show that team's cutscenes playing in sequence while their theme plays, which is nice. There's a song on here that you may not recognise from any of your playthroughs though. What I'm Made Of? I don't recall that at all. Anyway, joke aside, as a kid, this was my equivalent of seeing Big Boss's name at the end of MGS4's first credits. I was just like, wait, what's that? I don't remember that. Aside from, well, that, Sonic Heroes just has solid stage design throughout, with some great variety in backdrops and usage of different traversal mechanics. There's nothing quite as cerebral or fiddly as something like the gravity swapping from SA2, but maybe some more of that thing could have given these levels some more unique spice. But then again, maybe that could have led to some frustration if it hadn't gone very well. I guess an attempt would have been nice though. Having each stage played with 3 characters actually allows for some nice running commentary and relationship development between them.
Only 4 lasers? A hero's welcome.
1, 2, 3, 4 laser cannons. We made it one down.
Even with 4 laser cannons, no one has to stop us.
In the previous games, the characters were quiet until cutscenes, but here, they're all chatting all the time.
Chip, You mean potato chips?
Not those kind of chips, silly!
This could get annoying, especially if you don't like the voices, and end up hearing them a lot due to repeated attempts, but I like them. It's just nice to hear them bantering with each other and about things happening in the stage. So you finish one team story, clearing all the stages, fighting the bosses, and putting up with certain quirks. If this was your first time playing the game and knew nothing about how it works, then you'd likely finish Team Sonic first, and then be excited to play through the rest of the team, experiencing their stories and stages of their own. Coming into this game after Adventure 2, I wouldn't blame you. But Heroes doesn't work like that. If you've been paying attention to the gameplay clips I've shown, then you might have noticed that there have been characters sharing the same stages. This is because every team has to go through the same stage progression. This means that you'll have to play every stage a minimum of 4 times in order to see the true ending. That's 4 times you need to endure the pinball, 4 times you need to survive the rails, 4 times you need to beat all these bosses, and 4 times you need to try and keep your sanity throughout.
Oh my god!
Actually, it's probably more than 4 because screw those pinball tables. If you plan on trying to beat Sonic Heroes in one sitting, or at least as your main game for a day or 2, then I hope you don't mind going through all of this. It's nowhere near as bad as Shadow the Hedgehog's slog of a progression system, but it's still not great. If you choose Team Rose after the other ones like I did, then you'll be forced to do the tutorial as a mandatory part of the story, being taught how to do the same stuff you've already been doing. That same tutorial that's already available as an optional thing on the main menu. Now, this game does have some great levels that are fun to play through, but doing them over and over again like that just gets so monotonous. This is made a bit more bearable by the fact that each team's versions of the stage have some differences in platforming and enemy placement, with Mystic Mansion in particular having the most drastic changes, with entire rooms being unique to some teams. So fast forward, you finally finish all 4 stories, you've cleared every single stage multiple times and you've beaten every boss multiple times. Surely that's the end, right? Haha, no. You don't have all 7 Chaos Emeralds yet. Or maybe you do, but let's just assume you don't. Like the old games, there are 7 Chaos Emeralds to collect via special stages, and hoo boy are they a stinker here. In order to access them, you need to collect a key. Now each level has a key, which lets you tackle its associated special stage. You need to pick up the key and then carry it to the goal ring without taking any damage in order for it to actually count. And if you don't, then you've lost it. Not all hope is lost though, because every stage actually has 2 keys for you to find, so there's backup just in case. It's only every other special stage that gives you a Chaos Emerald, so don't go thinking that you can just nab them all right from the get-go. The ones that don't give you emeralds, aka the first act of every pair of stages, just gives you extra lives. So you grab the key, fight tooth and nail to the end of the stage without a scratch on you. You're ready to take on the special stage and claim the emerald as your own. However, the special stages here are not good. Look, I've never enjoyed the special stages in any Sonic game, and Heroes is no exception. You have to run down a pipe like in Sonic 2, picking up orbs to go faster while avoiding hazards, so you can catch up with the fleeing emerald. Sounds fun, right? Well, when it actually works and you're speeding along, dodging nasties and picking up orbs, it's alright. But this is Sonic Heroes here, so of course there's a catch. There are times, I'd say lots of times, where the controls and physics inside the tube just decide that they've had enough for the day and pack up and go home. And the character you're controlling will just end up on the roof or slowing down for no good reason. This is incredibly frustrating, and it will most likely happen to you no matter how skillfully you play the stage. If you fail at catching the emerald, you'll have to replay the stage all over again. It's just frustration on top of frustration. Thankfully, the 7 emeralds are shared across each team, which means you essentially have 4 chances to catch each emerald. So don't worry too much if you miss one during a team playthrough. If you make it to the end of the game after every single playthrough and have 1 or 2 missing, then just replay the stage with Team Rose because their shorter length makes it much less painful. Or if you're playing on PC, just use save states, that works too. Defeat the last evil. What an awesome screen. Seriously. Amazing. Finally, with every story finished and every Chaos Emerald obtained, you're able to proceed into the last story. As a kid, I genuinely had no idea this was even a thing, and it was only when I had a friend over that I found out about it. I went downstairs to get a drink, and when I came back, he was playing something I'd never seen before. To say I was amazed was an understatement. This whole time an extra story had been there, on the right of the Team Select screen, without my knowledge. What the hell? Everything culminates here. Eggman reveals to Team Chaotix that the true culprit behind the game's events was someone else. The screen fades to black, and then resumes with Team Sonic running forwards towards a shadowy figure atop a spire. If you hadn't already guessed by now, then it's officially revealed. The true antagonist of Sonic Heroes is none other than Metal Sonic, returning from Sonic CD. He's had a few upgrades since the last time, and now sports the spiffy coat, going by Neo Metal Sonic. The Eggman you've been encountering throughout the game was a robotic proxy to throw you off. Notice how after the boss fights there'd always be a destroyed robot and a puddle of T-1000 looking goo? Yeah, that was Metal Sonic. I mean, you literally see him pop up a few times, so if you had your eyes open during those cutscenes, then it was hardly a surprise. This actually helped the different team stories make a bit more sense to me, since the repeated boss encounters can just be explained by Metal Sonic making 4 different copies of each and every one of them. We can just assume that each team was fighting 4 robotic Egg Emperors at the same time, for example. Does it make the repetition of the levels any less tedious? No, not really, but it does at least explain it. A few seconds after he's introduced, he immediately makes a proclamation of everyone kneeling to their master, and calls on a lightning bolt, which destroys a good chunk of Final Fortress. Through a lengthy transformation sequence that lasts a good 30-ish seconds, Metal Sonic uses the debris to craft itself a new body, a giant kaiju-looking monstrosity. All hope is lost according to Eggman. Ah, if only someone had collected all 7 of those Chaos Emeralds. Anyway, since I've already collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds, we actually stand a chance against this beast. Shadow tells Sonic that they'll buy him time so he can use a super form, but like, why? I mean, couldn't Sonic just turn super right there? The other teams need a reason to fight, I guess. This form is known as Metal Madness. Metal Madness is comprised of 3 phases, with each team taking him on in a different direction, standing on these platforms. It's a pretty straightforward fight throughout, just requiring you to hit his conveniently coloured weak spot. All you have to do to hurt him is use a character of a colour that doesn't match his. So if, for example, the weak spot is red, then use a flight or a speed character. Unfortunately, flight formation is really fiddly, and your shots rarely ever seem to hit him, which means the speed formation is your best bet. You have to be extremely careful, because there's a bottomless pit between the platform and Metal Madness, and there's a risk falling straight in if you cock up the homing attack. Each phase cycles through the teams, going from Team Rose to Team Chaotix to Team Dark, with the difficulty gradually increasing with more attacks and more weak spot shifts. He's not just going to sit there and let you hit him, so Metal Madness is going to try and burn you with a flamethrower, whip you with his tail, spear you with spines, and try and trap you in these crystal things, which are the most troublesome attack, because they trap you in the crystal ball, rendering their character useless unless they can be freed. If all 3 characters get trapped, then that counts as a death and you have to start over. Thankfully, each team carries over their lives that they accumulated over the course of their playthrough, so if you racked up a good amount, then you'll be fine. I really like the back and forth banter between the heroes and the boss here, especially Charmy's line.
Incomplete! Freak!
After Metal Madness has been defeated by the 3 teams, he breaks free from his, tubes and sprouts huge wings, then flies off. Team Sonic then finally powers up, and Sonic assumes his supersonic form. Tails and Knuckles get these, shields. Why couldn't they have just had super forms too? Thanks, Sega. The game's theme song plays, and they speed off into the sky, ready to confront Metal Madness. The final phase begins. This is no longer Metal Sonic. This is no longer Metal Madness. This is Metal Overlord. The fight begins with him greeting you by using that phrase the Sonic team absolutely loves for some reason, but I can't help but feel it's intentional here. I mean, Metal Sonic has been copying the data of, like, everyone, so it seems plausible that he'd pick up on some sayings. He refers to Sonic as his loathsome copy, which is already an indicator that he might have started to lose the plot a bit. This is not only my favourite boss fight in the game, but my favourite boss fight in all of Sonic. Each of Metal Overlord's attacks must be countered with a team member. If he shoots his crystal beam at you, then Sonic has to rocket to excel through them, making this the only time in the whole game that I actually like using it. If he shoots his spines, then Tails has to thunder shoot them away, because if they hit you, then you can get trapped in the crystals and get the game over like in Metal Madness. And Knuckles? Oh yeah, Metal Overlord occasionally dips down below the clouds and emerges with one of Eggman's battleships from the fleet in his hands, before chucking it right at you. Knuckles can then smash right through them with his fists. This is just awesome. We're not being told how strong these guys are through dialogue, we're actually seeing it firsthand. This is how you really sell a boss fight. Occasionally, he'll even use Chaos Control against you and freeze time, which means that you just have to kind of sit there and wait a while. Maybe use that time to go like the video and subscribe to my channel because it really helps. Sorry, I had to do that. You can't damage him through normal attacks, so the only way to take Metal Overlord down is with Team Blast. The gauge fills up automatically throughout the fight, and it gets boosted when you pick up ring balloons, so it's just a case of countering his moves and waiting for that opportunity. You don't take damage either, and the only danger here aside from getting crystallized is your ring count reaching 0. It automatically goes down, so it's good to keep an eye on it, but honestly this fight is quite easy, so you could probably get by just fine without ever looking at it, since you're likely to beat him before it even reaches the single digits. Metal Madness was definitely a bit more challenging than Overlord, but Overlord has it beaten in every other regard, so you can consider this a victory lap of sorts. Throughout the fight, Metal Sonic spits out dialogue that I swear down actually made me feel a bit sorry for him. A bit. He explains the circumstances that led him to this moment, and there's actually some interesting character development here.
Sonic, I was created for the sole purpose of destroying you. But I can never seem to defeat you. That is why I transform my own body with my own hands. But that was the past. Now you're nothing but a speck of dust to me.
It's not much, mind you, but in Heroes' relatively bare-bones story, then this at least stands out. You see, Metal Sonic was originally the ultimate creation of Eggman, a robotic version of Sonic designed specifically for beating the Blue Hedgehog. But repeated defeats again and again led him to taking drastic action. Since Eggman had given him a degree of artificial intelligence and free will, Metal Sonic decided to rebel against his creator and imprison him, acting from the shadows through smoke and mirrors under the guise of the Good Doctor. Each encounter with the heroes throughout the game was under the guise of gathering data, which he used to power himself up. When the pieces were all in place, Metal Sonic used everything he'd gained to transform himself into the monstrosity you're now facing. It's not really explained how it works, but it doesn't matter because he throws battleships at you. It's not the deepest motivation in the world, but I can't help but find it interesting that a character created for a singular purpose became so frustrated with his persistent failures at fulfilling that purpose that he willingly sacrificed his original body and sanity in order to try and finally achieve a victory, purely out of desperation. Then there's this line.
See me as I am, no longer afraid of anything.
Why would a robot, an artificial being, feel the need to assert that he is no longer afraid of anything? Is it possible that Metal Sonic, at some point, became so self-aware that he genuinely became afraid? Was he afraid that he would never be able to fulfill his purpose? For a robot, that's really human. Well, in this scenario, I suppose Hedgehog would be a better term. If he wasn't afraid before, then why would he feel the need to address it now? And that's just the English dub. In the Japanese version of the game, there's even more dialogue to pick apart. When the fight opens, he refers to Sonic not as his loathsome copy, but as his imperfect self. I like the English version because it's another example of him going insane, but the Japanese version admittedly makes a bit more sense in context. Metal Sonic was by design a more deadly and efficient version of Sonic, so the imperfect self thing fits. I think both translations are good for their own reasons. In the Japanese version he has this line. Which is very different to what you hear in the English dub. This suggests that he's aware of the fact that the measures he has resorted to would be viewed with disdain. He knows he's been looked down on for his deeds. He knows he's turned into a monster. But he isn't ashamed. He's proud of it. He's proud of making it this far and accomplishing all of this. To him, he succeeded in getting what he needs. And this is his moment of glory. What, you didn't think I'd neglect to mention the music, did you? Playing throughout the fight is What I'm Made Of, which I wholeheartedly proclaim to be the best Crush 40 song. Pretty much all of their Sonic songs are absolute bangers, but What I'm Made Of is by far my favourite. It's got this kick-ass guitar riff that sticks in your brain, with percussion to back it up and keep the whole thing exciting. Good music can really elevate the boss fight, and this is no exception. If it wasn't for this song, then I don't think this fight would have been stuck in my brain for nearly as long as it was. It's been a staple of my personal playlist ever since I got my first iPod way back when, and it's been a favourite thing to listen to even to this day. It's not just the instrumental that makes the song so special to me though. Johnny Gioeli is belting his lungs out here on the vocals, with lyrics that just enhance the fight on another layer to me. If you don't want to hear someone analyse the lyrics of a Sonic song for a few minutes and just want to hear the rest of my thoughts on the game, then I'd suggest skipping ahead now. I'll put the time on the screen. Metal Gear Rising in 2013 was praised for its boss lyrics that told a story and fit the character, but Sonic Heroes already did that 10 years earlier. This is pure speculation on my part, and you are free to disagree, but when I hear these lyrics, to me, they are spoken from both Sonic and Metal Sonic's perspectives. Some of this may sound like a stretch, but I find this sort of thing fun to think about.
I don't care what you're thinking as you turn to me, 'cause what I have in my two hands is enough to set me free.
I see this as Metal Sonic, referring to the power that he now possesses, which could release him from this burden of the mission he's been shackled to since his creation. Maybe by beating Sonic you'll finally be free of this. Set me free? Yeah?
I can fight the feeling to resist it over time. But when it's just too much to take, you sneak up from behind.
This one is a bit more difficult to place because it could refer to Metal's desire to rebel reaching a boiling point, and the part about sneaking up from behind could mean the fact that he had to resort to underhanded, sneaky tactics to gain the powers. It could be from Sonic's view too, addressing those underhanded tactics in an insulting way from his own point of view.
Is it me you say you're looking for? Let me show you who I am and what I'm here for. Here for.
This, I believe, is from Metal Sonic's perspective. Going by the Japanese script mentioning how he's proud of his accomplishments and not caring about others looking down on him, I see this as Metal Sonic standing proud against the world, wanting others to dare challenge him so that he can showcase his newfound strength and the new level he's achieved. You could see it as Sonic making that declaration to the boss too.
Trying to reach inside of me, trying to drain my energy. Let me show you just what I'm made of.
The chorus, singing about trying to reach inside and drain energy, is clearly referring to Metal Sonic's plan of absorbing and copying the data of the characters. I don't think there's anything more to it than that though.
Simple curiosity, trying to take a bite of me. Let me show you just what I'm made of now.
Maybe this is Metal Sonic's failures eating away at him more and more as time went on, going from a simple curiosity over his losses, becoming a genuine fear which led to obsession. His own curiosity and obsession was literally taking a bite out of him.
Like a million faces, I've recognized them all, and one by one they all become a number as they fall.
This to me reads like Metal Sonic views others as nothing but nameless statistics, data to be erased like numbers on a spreadsheet. He is a robot after all.
In the face of reason, I can't take no more. One by one they all become a black mark on the floor.
Metal Sonic, unable to handle his failures, took drastic measures and grew so powerful that any potential threat to him would end up as nothing more than an easily squashed failure, a black mark on the floor.
You can't take another lifelong try. You can't take another try.
This one's pretty vague, but I think it's most likely from Sonic's perspective. Metal Sonic's very existence has been dedicated to defeating Sonic. It's literally taken him a lifetime to try and win. Sonic is daring him to try again, to come back and show him once more what he's made of. Am I looking too deeply into this? Probably. Maybe I just love this fight a bit too much and wanted to seize that opportunity to gush a bit. Anyway, after 5 team blasts he finally goes down for good and Sonic Hero's story comes to an end.
Yeah! We did it!
Phew, that was pretty tough. Too bad it's all over. For you!
And everyone else goes home. The only thing left is to A-rank every mission which unlocks super hard mode. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I mean, I've platinum Generations and got all the S ranks there, but Heroes has enough jank and awkwardness to it that makes me not want to care as much. It's a shame that the Neo Metal form was so brief, because it's an awesome design that could have been utilised in a bit more of an evenly matched boss fight. The fight with Overlord is a cinematic, epic clash that, while a bit on the easier side of the difficulty scale, it more than makes up for it in its presentation. It's a damn shame that Metal Sonic really hasn't that much of a presence in the game since, because they had a solid foundation here. He could have been a recurring foe that returned every so often to harass the heroes, or even an anti-hero who went on a bit of a journey of recovery after his monster's transformation. He did return in the comics with a new powered up golden form, and even quoted the lyrics to What I'm Made Of, in a nice little bit of fan service. But it wasn't quite the same, because he was still subservient to Eggman. I'm begging you, Jack Specific, please give me a Neo Metal Sonic figure. As far as bonus features go, there's a 2-player mode that I'm unfortunately unable to access because I only have one controller, but I'm sure it's amazing. You can rewatch any cutscene from the game if you feel like enjoying the story again without replaying the stages, and there's also a music player that lets you listen to various songs from the game. Let me tell you, I spent a fair amount of time on this before I actually got that iPod I mentioned earlier. Sonic Heroes is very much a game of butts. No, not those kind of butts, but in the sense that pretty much every positive of the game has a caveat. It's a good game, but The stages are fun with interesting design and mechanics unique to them, but having to do every single one of them 4 times means that you'll inevitably get sick of them. The teams and character swapping mechanic is cool, and it works when it needs to, but swapping between them isn't very fluid. It's good that there's variety in the stages that give each character something to do, but forced encounters that encourage to be played with power characters go on a bit too long, with damage spongy enemies that just kill your momentum. Grinding on rails is cool, but sometimes it just doesn't work. Metal Sonic is an awesome antagonist, but other than a few teases throughout, he doesn't actually become a big presence until the end, and we only have like 10 minutes to enjoy his character and motivations. I said earlier that Sonic games require a certain amount of put-up ability from the player, and I hope I've managed to explain that better through the examples I've shown and talked about. Heroes is a game that I personally enjoy and have a lot of fun with, and I think it gets a really bad rep. It's not for me to say whether or not it's deserved, because that's ultimately up to the player, but its shortcomings and issues are noticeable enough to warrant a fair amount of criticism. In the games that came afterwards, there were things that were fixed. There were also new problems created along the way. Sonic Heroes exists in this weird purgatory between the adventure games that are adored and the later 3D games, which are, well, people have opinions on them. From what I've seen, there's actually very little in between on this game. If you ask people what they think of Heroes, then it's usually, I loved that game as a kid, it was the best. Or, that game was a slippery, janky mess that barely worked and I hated it. Is it worth playing now if you've never played it before? Sure, why not? I think most games are worth playing just for the experience, whether it's good or bad. But that can inform your opinions and tastes around other things. Like I said, this was my first Sonic game, and since then I've played most of the ones that came before and after it. Though the gameplay has become more refined and the graphics / mechanics are more polished now, Heroes remains my favourite. It's got a lot of charm despite its shortcomings, and when the game does it right, it really does it right. But when it does it wrong, it really does it wrong. I'd say it's worth a go though, just for the experience and the really fun boss fight at the end, and the great music. I'm pretty much the only person who runs this channel, so I do all the recording, the editing, the scripting and the voiceovers, and any tweaks, so naturally things can take a while to complete. Thank you for your patience. I really like talking about things I'm really into, and I'm still working on my Gurren Lagann video, so please look forward to that. Thank you. Also, did anyone else used to think that these were burgers? Or is that just me?